Robin has been using this technique since we first met her, chuckling to Croc in Alabasta and indeed numerous other instances. A trait we found disarmingly confident was in fact nothing more than a smokescreen she herself deployed. The Marines eventually arrive on the island to put an end to the secret work being carried out by the inhabitants, and this is where we meet CP9, who do their evil thing. However, returning in time for this confrontation and event is Robin's mother, who eventually reunites with Robin briefly before pushing her into Saul's care. A former Vice Admiral of the Navy, she never sees her daughter again. Things go from awful to even more awful as Aokiji takes out Saul, whose parting words encourage her to search for real friends, a family that can stand by her like she deserves. And looking back at this scene, despite it taking place before Robin's famous line, you can clearly tell that these words were ringing through her head when she did eventually scream to the Straw Hats that she wanted to live. Having run from everyone her entire life, she has finally found her family, and one that she wishes she could be taken out to sea with. It's a wonderful full circle moment if you keep this flashback in mind when those famous lines are uttered. But what I found telling about this final exchange in her flashback was the parting words Aokiji offers Robin before he leaves her escape. He warns her to not cause trouble as he'll be the first one to find her if she did. In isolation, this doesn't mean much, but when looked at alongside his ambush in Long Ring Long Land, Robin's sudden out-of-character flurry clearly was inspired by this promise, one that clearly stuck with her and informed her decision in Water 7. If he was showing up there and then, it must be serious and dangerous for her friends. Now, what I love about this flashback, and indeed Water 7 and Eni's lobby, is that everything in Robin's life can be attributed to her past and the scars she bears as a result of that harsh road she's traveled. At this point in this series of character breakdowns, it's becoming a belabored point, but the level of attention to detail Oda has paid each and every character he's written for doesn't require me to point it out. It's all there, plain as day for everyone to see, ready for anyone to take an interest to find and uncover. The richness of this story is unrivaled in shonen, with Robin's character as a poster child for some of the most tragic and wonderfully consistent writing across hundreds of chapters. If there's one thing that this arc has proven beyond a shadow of a doubt, it's that uncovering the truth of a world like One Piece is a titanic task. The crew pushing through all the propaganda to uncover the truth behind Nico Robin forced them to come close to death on a number of occasions, pushing them to the edge of what they were currently capable of. And this was all to gain the truth behind one lone individual. If nothing else, this sequence from One Piece served to build a tremendous amount of anticipation within me at least for what the truth behind the Void Century has to offer. And I'm very excited. Beyond this point, Nico Robin's offerings in this story become more sporadic, or rather should I say sparse. And not in a bad way, she's still rich in character. Shabaudi is an iconic moment for the series, one that literally and emotionally fractured the team such that they were forced to come back better and stronger than ever before. Where Nami returned with a sense of security in her family's resilience or Usopp's newfound competence, Robin's return boasts an even more subtle change. Having already been mentally tough and physically capable, Robin's return demonstrated something else. In the first half of the series, she is presented as this mysterious woman shrouded in darkness and propaganda. But after Shabaudi, upon her return, she always almost has a smile on her face, proving that she is in fact right where she belongs. In Water 7 and Eni's lobby, the drastic choices and the actions she took were essentially to protect the crew from the negative impact she was having on them. However, in Dressrosa, we get the chance to see indirect demonstrations of the positive impact she had on certain individuals. There's a moment where the character Sugar turns Robin into a toy, and through doing so, everyone forgets about her. Now, what makes this technique interesting is the baggage that is explored through someone entirely vanishing from your life. What would that be like? In the case of Usopp, he forgets about Sogeking, a persona he invented to do the right thing. The love he had for Robin and the desire he had to save her was greater than his ego and insecurities. That's what Sogeking represents. Without her, he would be a fundamentally different human being and more likely than not, wouldn't have remained as part of the crew. And in contrast to the denial she felt towards herself and who she is, it all comes full circle in Wano, where she comes to the aid of Sanji, feeling like a valued member, one who is sorely needed in a symbolic moment that serves two characters. And through this conflict, Robin no longer fights against what she truly is or who she feels she should be. Instead, altruistically accepting herself as she is, accepting the light and the dark in a fantastically cathartic fight rich in character expression.
一人ぼっちなんてことは絶対にないんだね。その人たちのためだった。私は悪魔にだってなるわ。
おかえりなさい、ロビンさん。
ただいま。
The story of Robin has been one of discovering truth through pushing past trauma. And just like with all of Oda's characters, there are elements of poetry to her narrative makeup that, through their design, reveal more about her character's complexity and at the same time enrich the world around her. Nico Robin is a character that has a passionate and natural aptitude for uncovering the history of the world. She sees a sincere value in revealing the truth about it because, as she puts it, those who fail to remember the past are doomed to repeat it. However, the poetry of Oda's writing for her is that, despite having that modus operandi or proclivity for revealing the truth, she herself is a closed book, unable to either contend with or convince herself to trust the kindness of others for reasons that are rooted in the past, whether it be through abuse or tragedy. And once those scars are ultimately uncovered by those like Luffy and his crew, she eventually reveals all there is to know about her, and through doing so, blows the whole story wide open for us at home in ways that are still discussed and argued about today. The world government is one of the most compelling villains and antagonists in the story of One Piece, and through revealing the impact and motives behind their attack on her life, the world of One Piece has become that much more exciting and compelling. She revealed the truth about herself, and through doing so, shone a light on the entire world she inhabits. She's a beautifully designed character, and honestly, with the way this series is marching towards what is being described as the last few years of publication, I can't help but reflect upon how much less this story would be had it not been for that little forgotten girl on that island.
I've been playing Alpha Sapphire, and I found two shiny.
This video is brought to you by Kamikoto Knives. Dragon Ball Super's rumored.
I'm looking for Star. Sure, we could actually.
Ultimate Return is on the horizon, but it's also a show that's. Truth be told, I'm actually unreasonably excited to get into this with all of you today. So, let's dive into the very first saga that catapulted Dragon Ball into Japanese pop culture. I'm talking about the 23 chapter long Pilaf Saga. God, it feels so strange but amazing to be back in this world with new eyes. After having spent the last decade learning about storytelling, one of the first things that immediately became apparent to me was how effective Toriyama was at characterization, particularly with both Goku and Bulma right off the bat, utilizing paneling, framing, and dialogue to push this aspect of his story. You can absolutely tell that this isn't his first manga either. While the story is very simple, it is so for specific, measured reasons. The first chapter kicks off our story with the famous and effective first meeting of Goku and his soon-to-be lifelong friend, Bulma. And I call this scene effective because, while Toriyama has made plenty of questionable writing decisions throughout his long career, I don't believe he could have handled this first chapter any better. The priority of the first chapter typically is to introduce us to and bond us with the main characters of the arc, and immediately Toriyama highlights how these two characters he created are exact opposites of each other. Goku is physically strong but innocent and naive. Bulma is physically weak in comparison but is much more experienced and on another intellectual level to Goku altogether. With their first decisions made in this story not wasting any time in their characterization, acting as a window into who these people really are. Goku is inquisitive with some shockingly friendly and naivety thrown into the mix. His first action is to attack and use his brawn to overcome the obstacle, all the while Bulma, after reflexively going for her gun, a mechanical enhancement, her first thought is to try and manipulate Goku into handing over his Dragon Ball and to help her on her quest. This is our starting point, and it tells us so much about who these characters are and what possibilities might lie ahead in their story together. Furthermore, I was delighted to see Toriyama's brilliant use of paneling used to reinforce this avenue of characterization. More traditionally, I really appreciate how Toriyama uses his layouts to build anticipation for a page turn. This is a minor example, and I'll show more as the stakes rise over the course of the story, but this page with Goku overlooking a cliff, it's a tall and narrow panel with Goku pictured quite small atop of it, and it's given this real estate to tell us quite simply that this cliff is extremely tall, and on that same page, Goku is shown not to care about that as he jumps down with ease, communicating that this isn't a normal everyday boy. It's a small choice, but it sure as hell beats someone lecturing to us that he's some freakishly strong kid. And on the topic of visuals, the first chapter has one of my favorite panels in all of the story. This one. This image on its own, to me, acts as a microcosm of what Goku will do in the story moving forward. His outward appearance will make someone think one thing, and then they will quickly be taken off guard by something they did not expect from him. Bulma, up until this point, and even on this very panel's page, has been contemplating and formulating a plan to exploit Goku. She's seen it all before, and she feels like she knows exactly what's coming. And as Goku proceeds into his modest living quarters, Bulma doesn't find someone living there with him. She doesn't find anything she might be expecting. Instead, she sees a small boy earnestly praying before a totem representing his deceased Grandpa Gohan, the 4-star ball. I love this image. Bulma does continue to try and exploit Goku's understanding and innocent nature for her benefit, but this panel marks the moment she starts to build some sort of bond with the character. Moving on from that opening, I think it's important to point out that this arc is unlike any other Dragon Ball arc that will come after it. It's clear that Toriyama went into this with a specific vision, one that was inspired largely by the Chinese story Journey to the West, with characters like Goku, Oolong, and Yamcha, among others, encountering fantastical beings clearly inspired by the aforementioned story. And across these opening 23 chapters, Goku and Bulma travel across the globe in search of these magical orbs called Dragon Balls. Title drop. All in an effort so that Bulma can make a wish for a perfect boyfriend. You heard me right, she wants to wish for a boyfriend. Oh, how the times have changed, you might be saying. In pursuing these orbs, they meet Oolong, who was this weird shape-shifting pervert. We meet Yamcha and Puar as they attempt to rob Goku and Co. in the desert, as well as a litany of bizarre and crazy characters like Boss Rabbit, an individual in charge of a gang of rabbit cosplaying thugs that also possesses the power to turn individuals like Bulma into a carrot. This first arc is off-the-wall bonkers, bouncing from iconic scenes to comedic scenes to outright strange scenes, but what ties them all together is the strong focus on comedy that this first arc primarily basks in. The original Dragon Ball, particularly this first saga, is very comedy focused, with entire scenarios sometimes being built around a single joke. And these jokes have layers to them. Not layers of any intellectual complexity, definitely not, but layers of loose narrative complexity. And I mean that. For instance, despite many of you not having seen this part of the story, you may have seen this particular scene. Alright, so this one gag highlighting the innocence of Goku in this crazy situation has the knock-on effect whereby it informs and drives the plot through a secondary gag with Roshi later on, convincing him to hand over his Dragon Ball. Later again, after Bulma loses the capsules with her clothes and supplies, she has to borrow a dumb outfit from Oolong. It's a shallow gag, but funnily enough, it informs much of the humor behind the hijinks that takes place in the village with Boss Rabbit running the roost. This town they wander into has been terrorized by this gang that dresses up as rabbits, and when the townsfolk start to give Bulma a wide berth because of what she's wearing, she assumes the only possible conclusion is that they're intimidated by her beauty. All of these scenarios, the stuff with Goku, Roshi, Oolong, and eventually Boss Rabbit, are all examples of comedic moments that only work when we know the characters involved. Bulma scaring people while dressed as a Playboy bunny is a funny visual on its own, but it's even more funny when you know that this was the only outfit that Oolong had extra in his car, and it's made even funnier again when you realize that Bulma is so egotistical that she convinced herself that it made perfect sense that people were treating her this way because she was so beautiful. Now, is it stupid and borderline creepy given Bulma's age and
We won. These guys stink. You know they're mad. You know they're mad. That was my warm-up game. Disgusting. Well, I love collecting. I wanted to watch something. I forgot what it was. Sure, buddy. You're on the air. Sure, buddy. The only Pokemon I can play is Gyarados. He's just so much fun. Robbie. Oh, I remember. It was One Piece related. Fuck. Oof.
The Minecraft community is in shambles. Wilbur Soot has been accused by an ex-girlfriend, while George Not Found has been accused of SA by a small streamer named Katie. This is fresh off of the heels of false allegations against Dream, which he was able to accurately debunk on his own channel. So, what the hell is going on? Wilbur Soot originally came from the Soot House channel, where he and his friends would react to funny Reddit posts at a time when that content was dominating YouTube. From there, he became exponentially more famous than all of his former collaborators through general gaming and lifestyle content. Wilbur had built his brand on being a soft boy, a male-identifying individual that displays more tender traits, from how they act to how they dress, that are stereotypically associated with the feminine. As his channel grew, he explored other creative avenues like music. Songs like Your New Boyfriend and I'm in Love with an E-Girl became actual hits with tens of millions of views. This in turn birthed Lovejoy, a British indie band he was a founding member of. All of these projects put together built him a channel of 6 million subscribers, one that was inherently tied to Minecraft content and the Dream SMP. It's through Minecraft he met Shelby Shubble, a 30-year-old content creator who's actually been on the platform since the early 2010s. In February of 2024, she would go live on her Twitch channel to make accusations about a large creator who she claimed had abused her. But it wasn't just any kind of abuse.
He's not hitting me, and it didn't start as something that he did to hurt me. He had this habit of biting, which is so weird to me now, but he said that he had had this habit since he was a kid, and even his mom said that that was true. And he said it was just affectionate, and that might have been, I mean, I think that might have been true maybe at the start, but I also feel that I have good reason to believe that every part of it was a lie.
According to Shelby, Wilbur had begun their relationship with love bombing, the act of an abuser to enter a relationship with someone to get their guard down and then begin their terrible behavior. According to her, he began biting right from the beginning, which was framed as a friendly thing, but over time he would continue to bite her and it would become more and more intense. She expressed discomfort, so they agreed on a safe word, one she claims he would frequently disregard.
He disguised it as this really quirky part of our relationship and was so comfortable sharing it with his friends, to the point that he would do it in front of them. He thought it was this really funny story to tell and a good bit to take my arm and bite me in front of everybody until I literally shout in pain. And then I have to laugh it off because I'm so embarrassed.
She says despite her continually expressing that it was extremely painful for her, he continued throughout the relationship without expressing remorse. This escalated to the point where she was covered with bruises all over her arms, which he would poke fun at and show off to his friends.
He would even joke that it looked like he abused me.
She said for every day they spent together in person, he would continue harming her, and they even had conversations in which she would ask him to stop, and he simply said, "This is who I am," and he wouldn't. At this point, Shelby didn't provide any evidence for these allegations, just her story. Despite this, various Stan accounts quickly figured out she was talking about Wilbur Soot based on their past relationship, and they began criticizing him on Twitter. He responded on February 27th, 2024. In the past week, a series of allegations have been made over my conduct from an ex-girlfriend. I want to emphasize that, although I feel it fair to offer my perspective, this person's feelings are completely valid. During our relationship's final months, I regrettably became slobbish, disrespectful, and selfish. These actions caused a lot of pain to my ex-girlfriend, and I've since sought therapy to address these behaviors. I have come to realize how much my past behavior hurt this person, but I truly, compassionately believe I have made great strides from the person I once was, and hope I can continue to grow and improve on this trajectory. However, he denied the most serious allegation, saying the allegation of abuse, particularly in the form of biting, deeply shocked me. Throughout our relationship, I understood from our numerous conversations and text message exchanges on the subject that this behavior was consensual, playful, and reciprocally enjoyed. I truly believe those personal message exchanges reflect mutual affection and understanding. Out of respect for her, I choose not to publish them, and I emphasize my perspective is not shared to diminish or invalidate anyone's feelings. His failure to provide these screenshots was his death sentence. Creator after creator called him out, officially cutting ties. A majority of this is full of ways you've claimed you've grown and changed since this happened, but you've basically made what should be an apology of the pain you caused someone about yourself, while barely saying anything else about it, and that speaks volumes. There were so many people coming out against him that someone made a thread of content creators who spoke against Wilbur and stood up for Shelby. Meanwhile, his stans, who believed he was a good person, began melting down. His extremely parasocial audience couldn't handle the idea that he was a piece of shit. And if what Shovel said wasn't enough, the next allegation sent him into the shadow realm. Another ex of his, Alice, claimed they had dated for a brief time. She reconsidered getting back together with him, and after meeting up, he allegedly got her drunk, took her to his house, and then undressed her as she blacked out. She didn't remember anything past that point. More creators continued to pile on to affirm the allegations and criticize his response. Dream himself condemned him, claiming he took accountability for being slobbish, disrespectful, and selfish, while overshadowing the physically abusive actions, and claiming to be completely reformed now. You seem to truly think you did nothing abusive, and this statement is built on that foundation. You're being dishonest with yourself, or dishonest with us, or both. Other Minecrafters like Amesy, streamers like Brook of 100 Thieves, and even Lil Tay criticized him. Wilbur has yet to respond, and even if he did, it's probably a losing battle considering how poor his first one was, and how many creators have cut ties. For now, it's unclear if he's totally guilty or not of the worst of the allegations, but public opinion certainly isn't in his favor, and maybe never will be. What happened with Wilbur and Shelby definitely opened the door for the next allegation, one that would be much more contested. Hey you, do you need to turn your swag up? Well, that's very convenient because this video is brought to you by G Fuel, the world's leading energy drink brand. They sell tubs of powder you can use. There are Quantum and Sour Blue Chug Rug for all you accused. She opens her Twitch stream about the subject by saying she had been inspired to tell her story by Shovel coming out against Wilbur. She was at VidCon, and her friends and her were at a house party. She says her best friend was romantically involved with the best friend of her soon-to-be assaulter. She wanted to go to this massive creator's hotel room, but did not want to go alone, so Katie and her friends all attended. She gets to the room where she meets these two large creators and has her two friends with her. Not much happened, they just played drinking games. But this soon-to-be assaulter apparently was flirting with her the entire night, which she found unnerving because he was the oldest there at 26 years of age, and she was 18. She assumed he didn't know her age. That night, she left after the games, but was messaged by this creator, all the while her age was in her bio. A few days later, Katie was again at a party with her friends, which got boring, so they decided to go to his hotel room again. She was relatively drunk upon arrival, and apparently one of her friends spotted her in the hotel lobby, expressing concern.
I remember a friend seeing me in the lobby on the way. They were worried by the way I was acting and asked if I was okay. I was really drunk, and it was an eerie feeling, like they could sense something was wrong, and I wondered what would have happened if I had picked up on it. And if I wasn't drunk, and if I didn't wave it off.
Back at the hotel room, the three girls were pretty drunk because they had just come from the aforementioned boring party. They were then apparently encouraged to drink even more by these creators, insisting on playing drinking games. While playing these games on the couch, this older creator who had previously been hitting on her and messaged her on Instagram made a point to sit right next to her. Around 3 a.m. while playing a drinking game, she answered a question about her age and confirmed that she was still a virgin.
Right before the incident, I had answered a question about my age. We were playing a drinking game and talking about sex, and I admitted to everyone in the room that I was 18 and that I was a virgin at the time. I remember back now to him answering questions during the game about back when he was 19 and when he was in college, noticing how my future was his past, and I wondered how he felt sitting so close to me.
Katie claims to be very uncomfortable with the situation, playing games on her phone to escape the awkwardness, when out of nowhere, she felt him slip his hand under her shirt in front of everyone.
Under my clothes, sitting next to me on the couch, in front of everyone. He disguised it with a simple, "Are you ticklish?" I coughed out a no, still staring at my phone. I was overly aware of the fact that we were in front of other people, the fact that everyone else was sitting around us, watching us, including my best friend, and that his hand was inching further to places I hadn't asked for it to be. He made a game out of my embarrassment, where he would touch me in certain areas to make me lose the phone game I was playing. I was scared, and I felt sick, either from the alcohol or from his touch. It didn't matter because my mind was a blur.
Katie froze up, unable to speak or move at all given what was happening. Eventually, everyone else left except for Katie, her assaulter, and this other massive creator. At some point, she goes to leave, and this older guy decides to leave with her. He pretended the elevator was broken so he couldn't leave, but after she expressed no interest in leaving with him, he left with a wounded puppy look. After this, he continued flirting with her on Instagram, asking simple questions about if she would be at another convention. But this eventually dwindled down and they just didn't talk anymore. Katie considered herself lucky, and the price she had to pay for hanging out with creators was to be assaulted. Throughout her account, she breaks down, saying it was the first time she had ever had intimate contact with someone.
That night, it was the first time anyone had ever touched me. I assured myself that I was just being sensitive about it all, that it wasn't a big deal, but assuring only can go so far. I felt dirty in a way that I couldn't wash off.
She claimed to be haunted by this incident for months, trying to cope herself into believing it wasn't that serious or she was lucky to have such a thing happen to her. While it eventually dawned on her that she had been assaulted, she didn't feel she could talk about it until she saw Shelby Shovel come out to tons of support. Maybe her story could finally be heard. Based on who was in Anaheim and the publicly known ages at the time, people quickly deduced the man she was talking about was George Not Found, Dream's best friend and a founding member of the Dream SMP. George has 10 million subscribers on his main channel alone and is easily one of the biggest content creators in the Minecraft space. He responded with a tweet saying he would never break anyone's sexual boundaries or assault anyone. Katie's friends like Max GG told him he should rot in hell for ruining his friend's life. When George said he would be responding with evidence, Max implied there was nothing he could say to refute the claim. He also addressed this on stream.
My friend cried in my fucking arms about this, and you're on stream denying it all.
Meanwhile, Katie posted a statement on Twitter preparing for his response. Pull whatever you can find. I've also screen recorded everything. I plan on using it to support my case if needed, but please share it on my behalf if you'd like, because we both know what happened. That's why I can sleep at night without scrambling for screenshots to try and twist. Emotions were very intense for those involved. On March 11th, George posted his first response, a pre-recorded video he broadcasted to his Twitch channel. And this is where things start to get messy. Unlike Katie's statement, George provides a few screenshots to corroborate his perspective. He begins by explaining that Dream's hotel room was not a typical hotel room. It was more of a suite with an area for the bed, a dining table, and a living room area with a couch. As a result, this room was used to host small after parties with friends. George claims the first night they met, he had been in a group chat with Katie, her best friend, Ghosty, and 3 other friends. These people had gone to an official VidCon party and wanted to hang out with him. Dream at the time didn't want to go to the party because he didn't want to wear his mask, but they wanted to come to his room and play a drinking game they played the night prior. prior. Katie and 2 of her other friends showed up to the room, which was his first time meeting Katie. George first claims he was unaware of Katie's age as she was drinking before she got to the room, leading him to assume she was 21 years of age at minimum and not 18. Given they had previously attended a VidCon after party, which he assumed was 21 plus, he didn't even consider her age as a problem. At one point, he even claims Katie had a 21 plus wristband on one of her hands prior to showing up, which would corroborate his story that she had essentially been posing as older than she truly was. As for her claim that he must have known her age because it was in her Instagram bio, he claims he just didn't see it. And also, we'll get more into this later, but she was 18 years old, so who cares? That night, they all apparently got along, playing drinking games and having a good time. Everybody goes home. Fast forward to night 2. It was the last day of VidCon, so everyone went their separate ways to do panels and meet other creators. That night, George met up with a friend he had known online who happened to be in the area and showed up around 5 p.m. They hung out at his hotel room, at which point Dream messaged him asking to hang out, so they headed to his hotel room again. Katie, her best friend, Ghosty, and 3 other friends make their way to the Hyatt, managing to get inside despite not all having hotel badges, and they go up to Dream's room. They once again hang out and play drinking games. While Katie had claimed only one person wanted to go to Dream's room and took her friends to not go alone, George claims they were all seemingly very enthused at going.
You can see in these screenshots from the text at the time that they were all trying to come to the hotel, and it wasn't just oh, we're willing to follow her, essentially. They were all in the group chat and part of the discussion to go to the hotel.
Additionally, as opposed to George insisting on playing drinking games, he provides screenshots showing all of the girls who came to the room were excited to play these games beforehand and even asked what app they were using to play the games. At some point in the night, everyone is pretty drunk. They move over to the couch area and George claims he sits next to Katie. She was laughing, smiling, and having a good time, as was everyone else. 2 of Katie's friends then left, leaving Dream, George, her best friend Ghosty, and one other friend, and then George's friend who had met up with him. While Katie claimed she had been playing games on her phone to escape the situation of being essentially creeped on, George claims she was playing a game on her phone while also passing it around to everyone in the room and playing with him. They also continued to play and talk about this game for months afterwards.
We actually continued to send each other high score updates even weeks after the event. To add further context to this moment, we were all actually sitting on the couch that was in the hotel room playing this game on her phone. And during this, me and Katie were at the far end of the couch and we were cuddling together. We had been cuddling for, I'd say, around an hour at this point, playing the game, talking, and just having fun. And for clarity, I had my hand around her waist above her clothes.
What George just said changes the entire allegation. According to him, he and Katie were sitting at the end of the couch, cuddling. He also says they had been cuddling for around an hour playing this game, and he had his hand around her waist above her ass. As for Katie's claim that during the interaction she had stated herself to be 18 years old and a virgin during a drinking game, George claims he doesn't remember this happening. As for her claim that Dream and George plied her and her friends with alcohol, George claims she was drunk before she got there, and it was a mutually agreed upon decision to continue.
They said they would join us in drinking and insisted on drinking games. They had already been drinking before they arrived. They were drunk, and the way this is phrased, it makes us out to look like we're kind of preying on them and like forcing them to drink when they didn't want to, when that's not the case. And as I mentioned earlier, they were even the ones asking to play the drinking games via the texts.
After an hour of cuddling, he says he placed his hand on her waist under her shirt. He also says it was around half an hour before he started moving his hand further up.
As I mentioned before, we had previously been cuddling on this couch for around an hour, but I did place my hand on her waist under her shirt. The way it's phrased makes it sound like it just happened out of nowhere, when in reality we'd been cuddling for over an hour at this point, and it was not out of nowhere. It was also around half an hour until I started moving my hand further up, and the way it's phrased just makes it seem like it happened pretty instantly and pretty quickly. There was nothing quick about it. It was very slow, and I was very cautious about it and making sure that she was comfortable throughout the process. Me and Katie were very touchy, very cuddly, and very slowly got more intimate.
As for making a game out of her embarrassment by assaulting her further, George claims that while they were cuddling, he would touch her to make her mess up at the game. One of the biggest points against George was that he took her silence as consent, but obviously verbal consent is not the only form, and physical reciprocation is also a pretty valid one. It's extremely rare for any sexual interaction to be as robotic as many in the community claimed it should be.
Excuse me, milady, would you like to partake in intercourse?
Why, yes, I would. I consent to intercourse with you.
Confirmed, milady. May I now touch your thigh?
Yes, you may touch my thigh. I do consent.
This is typically just not how sex works. George also claims that while cuddling, Katie got up several times to get a drink or talk to a friend, but she then returned back to the same position every time, time, cuddling George on the couch. Eventually, her best friend Ghosty left, while Katie decided to stay behind at Dream's room with George. While Katie framed her leaving as being creepily followed by George, George claimed something different. According to him, Dream was tired and wanted to sleep, so he asked everyone to leave. They left the room, and he went to the elevator. Her room was on the same floor as Dream, so he joked that it was broken a few times, basically encouraging her to come with him. She found it funny, but declined and went to her own room on Dream's floor, and George went back to his room as well. From there, their interactions were pretty cordial and full of banter, but this all happened online. They never met again in person. They also never sexted or had any other intimate interactions.
After this, we just texted for a bit, sometimes daily, sometimes we take a few days break, even a few weeks at some point, and at some point after VidCon, we were actually both in London at the same time, and she let me know this through her DMs. Now, I will say she didn't come out outright and say, I'm in London, but she did say that she'd gone to a place that was known to be a London thing, and I commented on that and said, and asked what she was doing in London. And just to clarify, we did not meet up whilst in London, nor make plans to do so. She was always extremely friendly to me, I was friendly to her.
George constructed a pretty well done rebuttal. The screenshots he provided went pretty far to dispel some of the smaller peripheral claims Katie made, like that George knew her age or had insisted on her drinking. And his claim that they were actually cuddling for an hour before the interaction changed everything. Why would Katie leave that out? Did she somehow forget? Given her level of detail and the seriousness of the allegation, it seems unlikely. Did she not mention it because she knew it made her story weaker? Her initial claim was that he slipped his hand up her shirt out of nowhere.
Out of nowhere, I felt him slip his hand under my clothes, sitting next to me on the couch, in front of everyone.
But according to George, there was actually consent given for him to touch her. They were flirting leading up to this. She had bantered with him over text about how she'd better see him there. They flirted and cuddled for an hour. He tickled her while cuddling and she expressed no discomfort whatsoever. And when his hand eventually moved to under her shirt, presumably to touch her stomach or waist, she expressed the same level of comfort and reciprocated interest. This was still very much a he said, she said, but his response meant that she had to have a very, very good rebuttal. On March 11th, Katie posted a 10-image long response on her Twitter. She addresses several of the points that George made, although her responses are pretty lackluster. He admitted to touching me, that I was drunk, that I verbally didn't consent. In my mind, the conversation is over. He said silence does not equal consent, yet never got verbal confirmation from me, chose to move to a sexual act on the couch where everyone was hanging out without asking. I don't know how those two facts coexist. How can I consent when there was no question? How can I consent when drunk? Obviously, asking for verbal consent is preferred, and sometimes that does happen, but as anyone who has had sex can attest, count me out obviously, consent in sexual interactions are typically not as cut and dry as asking every step of the way. Instead, a number of social indicators can communicate if someone is comfortable or uncomfortable with the interaction. So the idea that because Katie never verbally consented, she was necessarily assaulted is ridiculous. And from what George described, they had a pretty typical interaction that two people who are attracted to each other may have. They were flirting, they moved to sitting next to each other, eventually they cuddled, and after an hour of cuddling, he touched her under her shirt. Speaking of that cuddling, why was that left out of Katie's first allegation? She says, a lot of the touch was initiated by him, probably not realizing it. I mean, he was literally spooning me from my left as I faced Ghosty to my right. A lot of the cuddling he may have felt was personal, but was just me being drunk. Everyone on the couch was doing the same thing, all drunk, close together, but I got it. I was drunk. I didn't think cuddling automatically meant it was to turn sexual. I didn't know it was an invitation. I wasn't gonna push him off in front of everyone. He took it a step further in front of everyone, all because he assumed things and assumed he had the right. As a shy person, I could not speak up in front of him and everyone else, let alone say yes. Even if you wanted to take a step forward sexually, why do it in the open? If you're cautious about consent, why not ask? That's usually the first step. And more importantly, why does everything have to get taken a step further? And may I reiterate that I was drunk? She repeatedly uses the explanation that she was drunk throughout the entire thing. But of course, we have to agree that George was also drunk. If she expects to be absolved of all responsibility for being drunk, then how can we also expect George to be entirely responsible if he was? To be clear, I'm not saying sexual assault is okay if the perpetrator is intoxicated. What I'm saying is that Katie was not assaulted and she's not a victim. Even if you take the most uncharitable view of events from everything we know now, there's no way what George did was assault. As for the idea that cuddling isn't sexual, as an adult, I personally have never cuddled with someone I didn't intend on having sex with, or they didn't intend on doing that with me. And yes, that includes Wendigo. But she has an explanation for getting up multiple times before returning to the same position. Yes, I got up and sat in the same spot, getting up to drink more, etc. Mentally, I believe in a room on a sofa with people on it, you just sit back where you were when you get up. Mentally, I was also drunk, and even if I were to move, that would be an obvious hit to his ego and everyone in the room. A bold move I didn't need to make. I could just deal with it till the night was over, and I didn't want someone I had watched for a while or with a large following to hate me for denying to even sit near him. I didn't want to embarrass him or myself. I know it's a dumb thought process, I acknowledge it. She admits it was a dumb move, but doesn't seem to understand why it's being used to question her allegation. As for the messages he showed outside of Insta, all proof was him showing a group chat he wasn't even in, showing messages from my friends, which isn't me. The only message showing a response from me was when we asked about the drinking game we played. That was after we played it the first night, the night where nothing happened. I liked the game and wanted to play it with the other friends of the convention, so I asked for the name. Don't know how that's relevant to anything. It's obviously relevant because Katie claimed that George had insisted on playing these games.
At the time, all of us girls were already really drunk from the party we were coming from, stumbling and everything. There was more alcohol in the room, and we were encouraged to drink some more as they offered the bottles to us. They said they would join us in drinking and insisted on drinking games. And
the implication Katie makes here is that she was being given alcohol to make it easier to assault her. This is conveniently forgotten in her follow-up. It's also never questioned by anyone involved why George is being held responsible for this alcohol consumption because he was overage and Katie's friends were not. She was spending time with people who were over the age of 21 before she got to this room. How did she get alcohol? Why were these people never criticized for giving their underage friend drinks while George was? In regards to the Instagram messages between George and Katie where she was flirty and playful, she says, I was still considering myself lucky for what happened to me, even if I was uncomfortable and didn't ask for it. I was hating myself around now, thinking I was ungrateful, but as you can see, nothing insane or proof-worthy being said, just banter. And she does include a number of screenshots of their friendly interactions. You may have noticed a large focus on age here, and I think it's important to take a moment. Katie was 18 years old and 5 months at the time of these interactions, while George was 26, meaning in the United States, they're both legal adults, and Katie herself is considered an adult in every country in the world. But her age is repeatedly brought up, almost to imply she was being groomed, or her age was being taken advantage of.
I was freshly 18 and had just graduated high school a few weeks prior.
Any reasonable person would agree that an 18-year-old cannot be groomed. You can make your own choices. You may disagree with George at 26 years old flirting with and cuddling with an 18-year-old, and personally, if I was 26, I probably wouldn't want to interact with someone that age because 18-year-olds sometimes are stupid. However, her being 18 does not change the story or absolve her of any responsibility for her own actions. Again, I felt lucky to be talking to a verified account. A verified account, okay. Someone famous, someone I had followed and watched for a while. I was uncomfortable with what happened, but trying to swallow it and suck it up so I didn't have to acknowledge or accept it. Although our texting ended a month after, I can see why people find me at fault, but the thought process of someone who went through what I have is a very unique experience, which is why I understand why it seems stupid. Only so many people have been in it to understand. You may remember their conflicting stories about the elevator. Katie responds to his phrasing that she walked him to the elevator, saying that, I didn't walk him there. We both headed in that direction. I said, well, bye, and that's when he did the whole elevator was broken bit. She doesn't even include the fact of why they left, which was that Dream supposedly wanted everyone to leave so he could sleep. It seems kind of ridiculous that after cuddling someone for an hour, you would just say bye to them like that, but this one I'll leave up in the air for the most part because it doesn't really matter. Now, in regards to this friend that George had in the room with him, this person Katie did not mention, she brings him up here. She says he wasn't there for long, he left early, which is why I didn't mention him. I didn't even know his name. But here is a message from this guy. I've never spoken to him. This is simply a message he sent to someone who was in the room that night too, and it really adds to the situation. He left before anything happened. I'm currently watching George, 26, cuddle with Katie, 18. This message would seemingly imply there was something creepy going on and that George's friend agreed. If so, it makes George seem a bit less credible because apparently even his own friend felt uncomfortable with the situation. We had just met. Why did he think he knew me so well that he could assume how I felt, assume he knew what my mannerisms meant? You didn't know me. Apparently you didn't even know my age, but you knew what I wanted? No, he assumed it's what I wanted because why wouldn't I want that from someone like him? Katie is framing this like people who just meet for the first time never have sex. Casual sex is pretty common. There are apps like Tinder that are basically used to hook up with random people you've never met. No one in their right mind would assume flirting with and cuddling with a person is not a romantic gesture or an expression that you're not attracted to that person. How does she not see this? Whoever convinced her of otherwise, I don't know, but it comes across as downright delusional. And her framing around George's intentions is also pretty insane. He assumed it's why I wanted it because why wouldn't I want it from someone like him? To assume someone's intentions like this, typically, it's good to establish a pattern of behavior, and in this case for George, we have none. There's no history of entitlement from him around intercourse or pressuring people against their will that we've seen. She's poisoning the well to emotionally charge readers who are on her side who may have actually had an experience with assault. And if George really felt that entitled, why didn't he go further? Why didn't he ask her for sex? Why did he leave her at the end of the night instead of trying desperately to sleep with her? Why didn't he message her demanding something or acting entitled to it? I think the answer is obvious. And remind me, since when was smiling an invitation? When was sitting next to someone an invitation? Since when was being drunk an invitation? George never said that any of these things were an invitation, so I'm not even sure who she's talking to here. Now, one thing she did have on deck are some messages of people after the fact expressing worry that Katie may have been uncomfortable with their interaction. Hi, I want to make sure you're okay. I didn't like the way George was so touchy. And redacted person told me about the shirt thing, and I just want to make sure you're all right. Yes, I'm okay. It was definitely a bit weird, but I was drunk, so I didn't feel like doing anything to stop it anyway, and it's over now. Hey buddy, I wanted to double check with you that George didn't make you uncomfortable at all last night. I saw he was getting really touchy with you, so I just wanted to double check. Maybe? Bro, I have no clue. Like, in the moment I was chilling, but thinking back on it, I'm sweating a little bit. Like, damn. And especially after verifying he knew I was 18, and I also don't know if I was chilling in the moment because I was drunk. I don't know, I have to ponder it, or just forget about it because it's over with. So in both of these messages, she expresses that she was drunk, and looking back, she may not have done it the same, but in the moment, she didn't mind. Clearly, this could have been chalked up to an awkward, regrettable sexual interaction on both parts. And once again, mentioning the age, being 18 years old makes you an adult. In regards to the wristband situation, Katie had an okay rebuttal. She shows messages from a group chat which seem to indicate she personally did not have a 21 plus wristband on. It's clear that she sent the message in chat. Obviously, it had her hand, no room for confusion on it being my hand, and once again, he was not even in the group chat to see it, only Clay. Clay is Dream, by the way. And even if you just assumed we were all 21 because one of us was, all these assumptions could have been cleared up pretty quick with a question. I think if someone is drunk hanging out with another 21-year-old and you're under the impression that they just came from a 21 plus party, it's safe to assume that person is also 21 years old. Maybe George should have asked just to be sure, but once again, in real life outside of Discord, people are not constantly asking prospective sex partners how old they are. If they're at a bar, they probably just assume they're an adult doing adult things. And once again, this entire thing seems pretty ridiculous because either way, Katie was an adult. The girl who left early also sent me this message today. It's her conversation with Clay, Dream, that night before she left the room, as she recalls it to a friend a few days later. I typed a message on my phone and showed it to Clay being like, does George realize there's 8 years between him and Katie? And he looks at me deadpan and is like, I don't see why it matters. I'm like, oh, okay. I think this response is actually pretty valid from Dream if it is real because, well, if she's 18 years old, then why would it matter? She ends her statement with a long diatribe about how she is a martyr and doing the right thing. This will be the only proof or response I have is I don't have energy and have said all I have to say. Any further responses from now on, I will not be responding to because I'm physically away and also mentally taking a break. My comments on platforms are flooded with hate, so I cannot say I'll be active anywhere else. But I see the support. I appreciate you all. I just hoped some people would realize how so many unknown things go on behind the scenes and how dangerous blind idolization is. But I suppose it's an issue that will take much more time, and most importantly, this isn't a one-time thing. The larger creators that have reached out about their own stories concerning them and are still too scared of them to come forward, they make me sick. Women who have been friends with them, people I watch, people I've never spoken to, and people I have. This is so much bigger than me. Now, given how many inconsistencies Katie has, her framing of everything, and the lack of almost anything compelling in this response, many expected there to be a pretty succinct final response from George Not Found to dispel the rest of this and move on with his life. Instead, he made this tweet. Since reading Katie's new post, my perspective on that night has massively changed as she introduced new information I was not aware of at all before. I have much more I will say, but for now, Katie, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I really hope you can hear my words and try to understand that I did not have any bad intentions. That does not change the fact that you were hurt. It seems something in Katie's statement changed how George felt. The best assumption here would be that the message from his own friend likely led him to change his view. If one of his best friends online of years also expressed concern at what happened that night, could his perspective actually be wrong? This was followed by a Twitter space where Dream attempted to explain his side. He opens up saying he's sorry if he did anything to contribute to Katie's pain.
The very first thing I do, I want to be, is say that I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Katie. I'm sorry for in any way whatsoever that I contributed to your pain. I just would like to make it clear that until 3 days ago, whenever this first happened, I had no idea whatsoever that anything sexual took place in any way whatsoever. I had no idea of Katie's discomfort or anything at all until her original statement. I want to try and give some perspective for myself and on everything. I just want to make it clear that I'm not speaking for George. I'm not speaking about George either.
He brings up an allegation made prior where he was accused of bringing an 18-year-old to his room to get her drunk. That 18-year-old being Katie. This accusation was made by Average Harry, a small creator who is peripheral to the Dream SMP and creators like Tommy Innit. So Dream messaged everyone that was there to figure out what was going on.
And of course, when it first was tweeted, I was like, what is happening? What is this about? But then I thought about it and I realized, oh wait, this is probably about Katie. And I was like, wow, it's nothing like that. That implication's terrible. I didn't really invite her. She was like a +1 for one of my friends. I was like, I don't think they would think that it's nefarious at all. When that happened, I reached out to like everyone. I was, again, at that point, I had no impression whatsoever of any sexual thing happening, anything, any problem, anyone having anything, nothing. I had no idea. I thought that he was implying that I did something wrong with Katie. And so I messaged Katie, I messaged Ghosty, I messaged everyone else that was there, and was like, what is happening? What is this, what is this about?
From these messages, which we actually have between Dream and Ghosty, Katie's best friend, no one indicated anything bad happened that night in regards to Katie drinking in his hotel room, and there was also no mention of any misconduct from George. You would think that when Dream is being accused of this, Katie's best friend would have clarified in DMs that actually Dream did nothing wrong, but George did, and that's why this was said. For whatever reason, it didn't cross her mind.
When talking to somebody that was there, this was the first time ever that somebody mentioned ages. They said, oh, well, I'm not sure what any of this is about, but maybe Harry's saying that because, George is 26 or whatever and Katie's 18. And I was like, whoa. I replied, I was like, what? But nothing happened, right? Like there was nothing that happened. And of course they replied, and were like, yeah, no, I don't know. I don't know what they would probably just, and of course, still at that point, there was no mention of like sexual assault. There was no mention of any uncomfortability, anything at all to me or that I knew of remotely at all.
Ironically, in average Harry's pursuit to get one over on Dream, he outed the story of someone he believed was a victim without their consent, which is why Ghosty thought Katie would be mad at him. Dream also extends an olive branch, saying in the future, if anyone's had a bad experience with him or his friends, to just shoot him a message and he'll hear them out to try and clear things up. He never claimed that George assaulted Katie, but he does eventually break down a bit, expressing dismay that someone who hung out with him and his friend when they were partying and having a good time came away with a negative experience.
I left that night thinking that everything was a great experience and everything was, I had so much fun with new friends and old friends. And it's terrible thinking about looking back and knowing that someone else left it with not that same experience. And I wish that I had known that. I wish that I knew that then, in that moment.
After this happened, it was radio silence for a moment on both ends. Dream said that George would be responding, which made a lot of people very curious about what he had to say. Would he apologize? Was there something the public had missed? On March 16th of 2024, George posted a new final response. And in this video, we get some very interesting new insight and new receipts. He opens by saying his tweet after Katie's response was not an admission of guilt.
First of all, I just want to make it clear that my tweet that I put out after my first statement wasn't somehow admitting to guilt or completely backtracking on what I originally said. My perspective had changed due to new information that Katie had provided. So now I'm just going to go over Katie's new statement and talk about what she had to say. So first, she acknowledges the texts that I showed about them talking about wanting to play the drinking games are real, but that they were from her friends.
The reason why George brought up the messages of her friends saying that they wanted to play the drinking game was because Katie implied that the game had been forced onto her, when in reality the opposite was true.
I only brought up that point because the implication was that it was kind of creepy of us and we were forcing the game on them.
There was more alcohol in the room and we were encouraged to drink some more as they offered the bottles to us and insisted on drinking games, and already drunk, I obviously complied.
In reality, it was mutually talked about and everyone was just having fun.
As for why he showed the Instagram DMs, he says it was to communicate they were friendly for months after the fact, and it was never communicated to him that he had caused any problem for her. He also touches on the elevator story.
The next thing she talks about is the elevator. She said that we left at the same time and that her hotel room was on the other side of the hotel, so there was like kind of two corridors connected by an elevator room in the middle. So she's saying that she was just going past the elevator to get to her room. And again, this is totally reasonable. I brought this up because from her stream, the way that it was told kind of implied that I followed her out and then that she waited to take the next elevator instead of getting in with me while I tried to convince her to get in. I'll just play the clip of her saying this, so I'm not speaking for her.
I went to leave and the older guy decided to leave with me. We walked to the elevators where I didn't get on. He then pretended that the elevator was broken and that he couldn't leave, telling me to get in the elevator to prove it was broken.
In my original video, I just wanted to clarify this, that we left together because the night was over and that she was on the same floor, so she didn't actually have to take the elevator. And it seems like she agrees with this now.
Now he confronts the text message from his friend who was there, who had expressed concern about what happened that night. But as it turns out, this message was not even from that person. It was some random, unrelated message from someone.
She said she didn't mention him though because he left early and she didn't even know his name. And she shows a text message that she says is from him from the night where this happened, where he says this. Obviously, this is implying that he was kind of uncomfortable with what was happening, and also that he knew her age, despite just meeting her. And when I first saw this actually majorly changed my perspective on the night, because that would mean that my friend was also uncomfortable and somehow knew her age when I didn't. And even though she said that he left early, my memory of it was actually that he was the last to leave, just before me and Katie left. Dream also came to me and mentioned that this changed his perspective of the night as well, because that would mean that he was essentially the only person that wasn't uncomfortable, and that therefore he should have known. This really concerned me. I kind of was just sitting there like really thinking how could this have happened. So I reached out to my friend to talk to him about it. And it turns out that he actually didn't send this message. I'm gonna play a phone call that I had with him after I found this out, just because I think it gives more context.
What's up?
So there is a text that is claimed to be from you.
Yeah, I didn't send that text. I found out about it when you sent it to me. But yeah, no, that wasn't me. I don't know where they got that from. I didn't ask them for any of their phone numbers or anything like that.
For some reason, Katie had used this message to prop up her side of the story, when in reality it wasn't even from that guy. You could argue she was confused about who it was from, maybe she was misinformed by someone else, but whatever charitable view you want to give this, it's still a major flaw from her story and basically knocks down her strongest new screenshot. While this is totally anecdotal, this guy also says that Katie's recount of how this all went down is insane.
I couldn't really believe like half the shit I was seeing. Like, as someone that was there, like other ways that I've heard it being like described, like from what I was like reading and watching online, is actually kind of insane.
Katie claimed a lot of the touch was initiated by George and that she was uncomfortable with it. Once again, keep in mind she left the fact they were cuddling out of her initial allegation entirely.
A lot of the cuddling he may have felt was personal, but it was just me being drunk. I do think a lot of the cuddling was initiated by me, but some of it wasn't. I was also drunk, but my impression at the time was that it was very mutual. She also says that, quote, I didn't know cuddling was an invitation. I don't think just cuddling is an invitation for anything. I only brought the cuddling up because it's something that she didn't mention at all in her original stream.
We sat on the couch and the older guy sat right next to me while playing. It was a little after that when I resorted to playing games on my phone when it happened.
And again, it's something that I think people need to know about to understand my perspective fully.
George then addresses the situation with Average Harry. He reiterates a lot of what Dream said and expressed confusion at the fact everyone involved communicated to Dream that nothing bad had happened that night months before Katie went public.
Dream actually had a conversation about this with almost everyone that was in that room a few months later. One of their friends had actually tweeted about Dream, saying that he was inviting an 18-year-old girl back to his hotel to drink at VidCon, and was implying very negative things about Dream being a predator. So Dream realized this could have only been about Katie because it was a pretty specific call out, but thought that it was just being purposefully misleading from someone that hated him. Dream actually had no idea as well that anyone was uncomfortable and assumed that this tweet was implying Katie was uncomfortable with Dream. He reached out to Ghosty about it, asking what this was even about, and did the same to others, including Katie. Now, I'm not going to be showing Katie's text with Dream because at the time Dream had told her that her messages and conversation would not leave their texts. However, here is Dream and Ghosty's conversation about it. I was never brought up or mentioned at all. And also, when Dream makes fun of Harry for being ridiculous and making stuff up because nothing happened and we were all still friends, she said, exactly. She actually spoke about this on her stream very recently, and I don't want to speak for her, so I'm going to play the clip where she clarifies these messages.
The only time that we had a conversation about anything that had to do with that night was obviously when the stuff with Harry happened, and he texted me asking if it seemed like anything had happened, and I at the time said no, because the conversation was not about George. The conversation was about him, and it was about the underage drinking, and it wasn't ever about whether or not Katie, you know, it was always just about him and not George, which is why I said, dude, no, nothing seemed wrong, because he wasn't doing anything wrong, and I can stand by that. I will stand by that comment, and I said that in one of my posts that, you know, it wasn't him. That was our conversation. It was never about George. It was about him and the Harry situation, and it was about me. At the time had seemed that Dream was one who had taken advantage of Katie, and I said he didn't, and I didn't lie.
And Ghosty, I'm really not trying to use your words against Katie or you. I'm just trying to paint an accurate picture of our perspective of the night, and to do that, I kind of have to talk about everything that we knew. I don't think your words negate at all how Katie felt, of course, but they did affect how I perceived the situation afterwards.
If Dream is being accused of bringing an 18-year-old to his room to get them drunk, and he messages someone asking what it's about, wouldn't that be the time to mention, oh, well, Dream didn't do anything bad, but this happened with George? It's a reasonable assumption that this would come up, and it would dispel any confusion around Dream doing something bad as well. Ghosty is covering for her friend, which you can respect to an extent, but when people's careers are on the line, you have to do the right thing. George also claims that many of the people involved in this situation continued to be cool with him after the fact, despite supposedly knowing and believing this story from Katie.
I just assumed it was because of Dream. Dream had false grooming allegations against him, and I assumed that because of this and my association with Dream, people didn't like me. After Dream posted his video disproving these allegations, I honestly thought pretty poorly of creators that were still negative to me, as now I thought there was literally no reason for it. And now, after seeing Katie's follow-up, I realized that probably everyone knew about this behind the scenes, and I think that is insane. I was walking around with these people at other other events or interact with them in any way, and all the time they were just thinking terribly about me, and I didn't even know, and neither did any of my friends. If I'd seen Katie in person, I would have gone up to her normally. I would have assumed we were still friends. I think this is a massive injustice to Katie. It actually kind of makes me rethink a lot of my experiences with other creators, just looking back on it with this new information. And I don't even know who these people are. And even right now, after all of this information is public and out there, I still haven't had a single private conversation with anyone who knew about it prior to Katie's stream. This is all just to say that I didn't have any idea that there was a problem, and I wish that I had, and I should have.
He then claims that the reason he never saw her age in her bio is because Katie had a professional business account on Instagram, which does not show any special characters in a username, including her age. This entire response put the ball firmly in Katie's court. She was being criticized on Twitter, even by Dream Stan accounts that had initially supported her. Too many holes had been poked in her story for even them to ignore. Over on YouTube, commentary channels were going guerrilla mode.
She is completely and utterly disregarding this cuddling. That is completely and utterly out of the window now.
It was an accident, chat. It was an accident. She had a little oopsies, chat. She had a little oopsies, included the wrong screenshot. Tee lol. I listed all of the accidents that Katie's had so far. Here we go. I'm freshly 18. Okay, so VidCon is June, sweetheart, and your birthday's in January. You were 18 for 6 months. That's not freshly. It was my first convention. Okay, so you went to TwitchCon prior to this. It was actually not your first convention. We showed up drunk. Now, I don't know who to believe here, but your friend went on live stream and said, oh, Katie must have been mistaken. We didn't drink before that. Oh, okay. And then she misspoke, was claimed by her friend and others about her. Yeah, Katie was reading from her notes and had time to issue a pre-prepared statement. There's no such thing as misspeaking. She had plenty of time to issue both of these. In fact, she sat on these for a year.
Part of it that's been brought up is the fact that she said she talked to some of her friends and stuff. There seems to be some kind of friend group behind this. A lot of people speculate it's this girl named Amesy. I don't know if that's true at all. But whoever her friends were that, you know, played into this delusion that she had, and, you know, the power of suggestion can be very powerful. It can make you misremember things even, and take events very differently. It's very possible that there were some people behind the scenes that were making her think that it was worse than it really was.
And this brings us to Katie's final response, the allegation to end all allegations. On Sunday, March 24th, Katie fired up another Twitch stream to respond to George's response.
The tone of this new stream is very different. While before she was crying, she's now filled with rage. The biggest development here is that Katie changes her story, or updates it if you want to believe that. Previously, she said that George stuck his hand under her shirt. She never went into detail about what that meant, so everyone assumed this meant tickling her or touching her stomach. She now claims that George did something else.
The one biggest thing that I want to clear up, it is fucking sexual assault, okay? I'm not gonna apologize, say that it isn't sexual assault, that I'm not a sexual assault victim. The touching that he has admitted to many times is touching, that he admitted to not asking or getting my consent before he did. He felt up my tits on a couch with other people there.
She is enraged that people don't believe her story and insists that she told the truth.
It's not fake allegations. I'm not a liar. Quite literally, the thing that I was talking about is my sexual assault. And that's the one thing he confirmed. He can sit there and confirm that he did it. And I'm still sat here.
you're expecting the rest of this video to look like that opening, then I'm sorry, I don't know what to tell you, but expect my dog bowl editing from here on out. Thank you, Lord Look, for giving me that oomph I desperately needed. Good Lord. Monkey D. Luffy, the man who's plagued our pages, screens, cars, and even buildings, ever since his legendary introduction all the way back in 1997. He's gummed into our hearts, and he's been there ever since. While not a household name in all countries, he's still become a defining character and protagonist in our modern day pop culture. If you don't know his name, you at least know him. And if you don't know him, you at least know that damn hat. And something I've noticed about Luffy that's so special and makes him stand out in terms of shonen protagonists, or any protagonist, is just how beloved he is. Luffy consistently has always won character polls. Without fail, he is the most voted for beloved character within the entire series. Over the course of 27 years, he's never budged from being number one, which tends to be a genuine rarity, because protagonists, especially shonen protagonists, have the difficult task of being the semi-self-insert character. A shonen protagonist, a lot of the time, is meant to be the reflection of the viewer. They are meant to be relatable to the point they do have character, but lose enough so we can somewhat fill in those blanks and also somewhat mold our own character. So when character polls happen in manga, especially in shonen, it's never surprising when the protagonist isn't number one. The number one spot tends to go to more explosive characters, more ridiculous characters, more characters that have more character. Save for one or two examples, the MC is not always, and rarely, the fan favorite. But Luffy, he just keeps winning. And when we consider just how big One Piece is, just how many characters exist in this series, just how many have been written so well, with so much depth, to the point they could be their own protagonist in their own stories, it is nothing short of impressive that Luffy is forever the fan favorite. In my opinion, that's a sign that Oda is an exceptional writer, especially of character, because Luffy is meant to be electrifying in personality. He's meant to make people love him. He does capture hearts in seconds. So it's incredibly meta that he does that both in the canon universe and in the real world as well. If you're trying to make your character likable to other characters in the story, in your fictional world, then by all means you need to make your character likable in the real world too. Otherwise the audience is taken out of it and your protagonist becomes annoying and unbearable. Oda has done his job tenfold with Luffy, but that's not what makes Luffy so interesting. What makes Luffy so interesting is he has traits that are dislikable. Luffy is impulsive. Luffy is aggressive. And the biggest one, Luffy is selfish. He's extremely selfish because when Luffy wants something, he gets something. You cannot tell Luffy no, or more like, Luffy will not take no as an answer. If Luffy wants to do something, he does it, since he's a man that works on pure instinct. But the reason Luffy isn't annoying, and the reason his selfishness isn't a negative trait, is because he's selfish in a selfless way. This guy is a walking oxymoron, and I will expand on that later. But for now, just keep that in mind. Because there is genuinely so much to cover with Luffy. Because he has endless scenes and endless points of interest. So I will be breaking this video up into parts and chapters. Maybe I should have done this with all the other Straw Hats, but here we are. Luffy is just such a beast, I have no other choice here. Before I really get into it though, it's sponsor time. This video is sponsored by Tokyo Treats and Sakura Coal. Sakura season is blooming in Japan, which means Sakura Treats for all. If you don't know what this is, Tokyo Treats is a monthly pop Japanese snack box where you'll get up to 20 of the latest, most exclusive, limited edition and seasonal flavored Japanese snacks. This time, I've got the April box and it's full of delectable treats. These boxes are pretty big and very generous with their packing. My absolute favorite treats from this box were the premium Gunner chocolates and the strawberry Kit Kats. My stinky cat even agreed the Gunner chocolate looks so yummy scrummy, but everything was delicious. And next we have Sakura Coal, which is a monthly Japanese artisan snack box. Sakura Coal supports local Japanese snack makers with each box they send out, and they all come with 20 traditional, authentic and artisan Japanese snacks, including Japanese teas and a special Japanese tableware. The tableware for this one was a beautiful cherry blossom glass, which I could not stop looking at. My favorite snacks for this box were the white chocolate strawberries, because these are honest to God my most loved Japanese sweet ever, and the Sakura Mochi. You can learn more about the snacks as well as allergen information from the booklet you receive, so it's tasty and safe for everyone. These boxes are well packaged and are packed with a lot of love, and I'm enjoying every single one I get. If you're a snack lover yourself, I highly encourage you to try these monthly snack boxes out and get your own little slice of the sweet side of Japan, all from the comfort of your own home. If you want to give it a try, don't forget to use my code to get $5 off your first box. Be sure to check the links below. And thank you so much Tokyo Treats and Sakura Co for sponsoring this video. Alright, time to stretch out and analyze our beloved king of pirates, Monkey D. Luffy. Hold on tight and take notes, because this very well may be a never-ending ride. Something one may hear about Luffy, or one may think of Luffy, is what's there to talk about? Luffy is, on the surface, an exceedingly simple character, and while that's not untrue, I fully believe he's like Zoro in that way. Zoro is also a character who seems very simple on the surface, but deeper down, there's a lot more there that creates an actual character. Just like Zoro, Luffy is a simple guy, but he's not a simple character. There is no shame in being a simple guy with straightforward goals and set ideas. And let me just say, do you know how hard it is to write a character like that and have them not be boring? Because Oda does indeed make these characters simple in mind and in life, but what builds them up is their struggles, their relationships, and their beginnings. All great characters have a beginning, and Luffy starts with an electrifying boom. For closer to canonical purposes, I'll talk about the manga specifically, but I am very fond of the anime's opening too. Both of these openings show how spontaneous and carefree Luffy is. One of them just focusing on his childhood more than his adulthood? Teenhood? Captainhood, I guess? Whatever the current pirate part of his life is. And arguably the biggest part of his childhood. The biggest driving force of Luffy's character is Shanks. We all know it. It's no secret just how much Luffy admired Shanks, and just how doting Shanks was on this insane little kid. Why was Shanks so enamored with Luffy? I don't know. I'm not here to talk about that. I'm of the opinion Shanks just saw Luffy as a very fun and strong-willed kid he thought was funny. But at the point of this video's release, we genuinely don't know his lore reasons, if any, for why he cared about Luffy. At that point in time, in these first pages, Shanks was hardly a character. We didn't know his ambitions, we didn't know his goals, and we didn't know anything about him. We didn't even know he was as powerful and notorious as he was. But that didn't matter, because Shanks is not here for us to know Shanks. All we had to know is he was mild-tempered, he was carefree, and he was kind, because that's what Luffy knew. Shanks is a driving presence of Luffy's character, although I'd call it more of a speeding presence considering just how detrimental Shanks is to Luffy. The Mountain Bandit bar scene teaches Luffy to only fight when there's a reason to fight, and to keep your head when a person is seemingly trying to start a fight. As Shanks said, needless killing doesn't make you a man. And if you haven't realized, one of One Piece's continuous themes is that Luffy doesn't actually kill people. He beats the shit out of them, but he doesn't touch them once they're down. I'm not saying Luffy hasn't killed people, but without Shanks' words here, Luffy would have turned into a very different pirate. Shanks' saving of Luffy's life from both the bandits and the sea monster is another core of Luffy's character, because this is an act Luffy one day wants to make up for. Luffy owes his life to Shanks and owes him back for the arm Shanks lost, something Luffy doesn't take lightly at all. This moment is where Luffy was taught to appreciate sacrifice when it's self-decided and self-acted for the people you love. As we know, Luffy is very aggressive and very stubborn in regards to those he cares about. Once he's decided he will help you, he's helping you, no matter the cost. After all, he watched his mentor lose an arm for him, demonstrating the grit one needs to protect those they care about. So how can Luffy not become a terrifying force to reckon with if his loved ones are touched? But more than anything, this moment taught Luffy to appreciate life, especially the life saved by those protecting you. It's not just me theorizing this, it's even shown to us during the Baratier, when Luffy gets mad at Sanji throwing away his life to pay back Zeph, saving him years before. And when Luffy does get angry about this, what does he think about? He thinks about Shanks losing a limb, similar to Zeph, and how that saved Luffy's own life. The last thing Shanks taught Luffy came with the passing of the hat. The straw hat and the passing of said hat is iconic for a reason, because this is the moment that not only completed Luffy's iconic look, but it's a scene that presents and cements one of the main themes of One Piece. This theme is the inheriting of wills and dreams and the aspiration to make those dreams come true. Because what does Shanks say to Luffy? Keep this hat safe for me. Promise that you'll give it back to me someday when you've become a great pirate. Shanks doesn't give him that hat until Luffy declares for the first time that he will become the king of the pirates. Shanks is definitely the one that pushed this dream with his childish taunting, but with the passing of the hat, we can definitely take it as a symbol of Shanks's faith in Luffy. This could very well be why Luffy starts crying, because amongst other reasons, his mentor has just validated his dreams with something Shanks declares in his own words is very precious to him. And boy, did that hat hold a lot more meaning and history than we ever could have imagined. Shanks defines 3 permanent cores to Luffy that we still see very obviously to this day. The love for family/crew, the will to chase dreams, and the freedom of pirates. And also, food, I guess, if you want to count that as a core. 3 cores plus food, let's go with that. In saying that, actually, I will get into why food is so important to Luffy's character, but I'll touch on that later. With these 3 cores established, the journey onwards is Luffy's challenge to keep these cores. That tends to be an established theme of character for the majority of the Straw Hats, such as Zoro's challenge to keep his loyalty and by extension his promises, and Sanji's challenge to keep his kindness and beliefs. If Luffy wants to keep his dreams, his family, and his freedom, he must face challenges. The conflict with Luffy doesn't usually come from within Luffy, but from outside sources, and this is how he grows. Because from what I've discovered, there's a misconception that Luffy hasn't developed as a character, and And we are not talking in strength or in power, we are talking in maturity as a person. I know us hardcore Luffy fans out there scream at the top of our lungs that this isn't the case, that he has matured. And listen, my love, we're right. Luffy from the East Blue is indeed different from the Luffy we've seen in Wano. He's not entirely different though, and that's where people get caught up. Because I think everyone's expecting some dramatic change from a boy to a man. But he's not meant to be entirely different, because he's been able to keep his 3 essential cores. And most of all, he has kept his smile, which is where I think a lot of viewers get hung up on. Maturity does not mean you become jaded, or you become a scowling, angry adult, which is what Luffy is directly challenging. But I'll keep that in my back pocket until the end of this series, and you should keep that in yours too. So, let's jump back to the start and analyze what Luffy is like directly after Shanks, because seeing him as a child is one thing, seeing him as a newly announced pirate is another. Luffy's introduction with Kobe, in my opinion, is the best way we could have ever gotten a quick and natural insight of his character. It shows us how inspiring Luffy is and how he pushes people around him, and also how he's kind of a dick by accident. My favorite line from him here is when Kobe is explaining why he can't run away from Alvida, and Luffy calls him dumb, gutless, and worthless, all in the span of a single page. The anime makes it funnier when he just tells Kobe, wow, I hate you. Just shoot him dead at this point, Luffy. The poor boy has already been through so much. This is a recurring trait with Luffy, as anyone he meets who he deems a coward is someone he can't seem to stand. During Fishman Island, Shirahoshi was the person he said he hated. And it's very funny we have these 2 Kobe-like characters in both first arcs of each saga. It's almost like Oda's making a point about Luffy's character here. Luffy very much wears his heart on his sleeve, hence why he outright says the way he thinks and feels. Yet somehow, he's still endearing, and that's mostly because even though he tells both Kobe and Shirahoshi he hates them, it's very clearly not from a place of malice. It comes from a place of frustration, because both Kobe and Shirahoshi had dreams they wanted to accomplish, but due to unfortunate events, they pushed their dreams aside and given up on their future, which is something Luffy cannot stand more than anything. As much as Luffy hates being restricted, he hates watching others restrict themselves due to their lack of will, because he wants them to live as large as he does, especially if they have a dream. Kobe's existence here is a showing of how influential Luffy is, because after their meeting, Kobe finally stands up for himself against Alvida. Luffy honestly didn't do much apart from punch her out, but Kobe is the one who decided himself to finally stand up to her. Luffy's words of wanting to be the Pirate King, of giving his life to his dream, made Kobe realize what a coward he really is. This not only repeats itself with Shirahoshi, but it repeats itself with every single Straw Hat Luffy eventually meets and recruits. To put simply, Kobe's addition here is showing us that Luffy is so amazing of a person, and so inspiring of a person, that no matter who you are, how small you are, how weak you are, Luffy pushes you to want to be better. And he does this simply by existing, which again is an exceptional way to introduce Luffy as a pirate, and is a fantastic showing of why Luffy is undoubtedly the captain of his crew. And in speaking of his crew, I say we touch on them, because Luffy cannot be Luffy without the Straw Hats. let's get one thing straight here. A crew to Luffy does not mean just a crew. It does not mean your standard pirates who have joined for the sake of joining. A crew to Luffy, as I'm sure we are all aware, means a family. Every One Piece fan in existence understands that Luffy uses the word nakama for his crew, and we also all know there is no direct English translation for such a word, because it doesn't quite mean crew, it doesn't quite mean your standard family, but is instead a secret third thing that holds a double meaning in regards to who you use it on. This is why when you talk about pirate hierarchies and pirate positions, none of these apply to the Straw Hats. The only permanent and traditional position the Straw Hats have in regards to a hierarchy is the captain. Stop, because I know what you're gonna say, but believe it or not, there is no official first mate. I know, okay? I was shocked too. But apart from Bartolomeo saying Zoro was the first mate, and other outsiders assuming Zoro is the first mate or captain, the crew themselves don't actually have one. Luffy never calls anyone the first mate. No one calls themselves the first mate. And Oda actually debunked that with an SBS semi-recently. I kept waiting for Zoro's little info card at the beginning of each chapter to change to first mate, but it stayed as swordsman. And then Oda made this cover art where he said, and I quote, "Similar to Zoro, not all of those characters have the title of first mate." I was shocked, mainly because I thought first mate meant first to join, but that doesn't seem to be the case. Or maybe I'm just stupid, I don't know. Either way, I'm very open to someone on the crew, specifically Zoro, developing into the first mate. But for now, there's no such thing. Honestly, this is probably the biggest misconception I've seen with Luffy and the Straw Hats. After my initial shock, my immediate thought was, but why don't the Straw Hats have a first mate? Is that not essential to a crew? The answer to that I've discovered is because that's not how Luffy works. And it would disrupt the trust he has in his crew to give any single crewmate a special label in regards to crew hierarchy. Because there's no first mate, there's no vice captain. There's just Captain Luffy and the Straw Hats, which is a great display of how Luffy sees his family. The Straw Hats are purposefully not meant to be like other crews, and having a first mate creates a power imbalance amongst the Straw Hats regarding who Luffy trusts the most that ruins the dynamic of them being a collective. Hell, early on there's even a page of Usopp telling Luffy he'll take command if Luffy wavers, and Luffy tells him that's fine. The Straw Hats essentially laugh at the strict hierarchy other crews put on themselves, because otherwise, what's the difference between a marine ship and a pirate ship if you hand out vice captain labels and strictly stick to it? Luffy would never compare his crew in terms of putting his trust above or below anyone. That's not like Luffy, and that's not like the Straw Hats. The fact there's no first mate means Luffy completely trusts his crew to make their own decisions as a whole when he's not around, which he does. Time and time again, he puts full faith in all of his crew no matter the situation. In fact, Luffy hardly commands his crew, and will naturally allow someone more knowledgeable of the situation to take over when necessary. Luffy is the solid ground the Straw Hats have found their home in. He's what connects them, and due to zero restraints regarding biases or different levels of trust in other crewmates, they've all been able to flourish around him. This is why, when Luffy chooses his crewmates, he very clearly does not choose on ability, but through strength of person and soul. Because Luffy is not looking for a fantasy football team. He is looking for a family who he can love and who loves him back. he never saw Zoro fight before recruiting him. He never saw Nami navigate upon choosing her, and he didn't even taste Sanji's cooking when wanting him. There are some exceptions, of course, but with how Luffy is so recruit happy, it's very obvious he goes by vibes alone. In regards to Zoro, Luffy is originally interested in him because he hears the rumors from Kobe. Luffy is someone who decides for himself what to think, hence why he doesn't believe the rumors and takes an interest in Zoro before even meeting him. Once seeing him and talking to him and discovering Zoro's harsh attitude is essentially all bark, Luffy wants to recruit Zoro immediately. I explain this much more in my Impact of Introduction video, but Luffy could see both Zoro's strong will and golden heart beneath the harsh surface, and it's why Luffy almost instantly took a liking to him. Zoro is very similar to Luffy when comparing the will to achieve a lifelong dream that is arguably stupid, and it's no wonder the two of them got along in seconds. In the same way Luffy laughed off giving his life to be the Pirate King upon talking to Kobe, Zoro did the same thing when telling Sanji only he can call himself foolish when giving himself over to his dream. Off the bat, Luffy could see Zoro was fighting against the world no matter the odds, and Luffy loves that more than anything. Nami was similar due to using all the power she had to achieve her own dream, which was, at the time, to free her island. Nami was an incredibly witty and strong-willed person, and Luffy very quickly recruited her because, once again, he could see this aspect of Nami. When Luffy's decided Nami's his navigator, she's not only forever his navigator, but the best navigator, showing just how quickly and confidently Luffy trusts and loves a person once concluding they're part of his family. Luffy does the same with Sanji, and the Baratier arc is another showing of just how powerful of a person Luffy is. Zeph outright states Luffy is a person you never want to go up against, because his will and grit is unbeatable. Once someone like Luffy is your enemy, you have no chance of winning due to Luffy's ability to always get back up, no matter what. Luffy's determination pushed Sanji's own, in the same way Zoro's did as well. The Baratier arc was not just Sanji's arc, but an arc that showed how Luffy's big dreams caused everyone else to dream big too. Zoro pledges his life to Luffy in the same arc, while Sanji confesses his fantasy of the All Blue right after seeing the near impossible by both men. Because that's what Luffy does. Luffy reaches into your soul and yanks that childish whimsy right out of you. He's a stupid guy, but that stupidity is infectious. And by God, if that doesn't make everyone around him want to shoot for the stars. Especially when this is a man who clearly refuses to leave you behind. Even if he has to tug and pull you into the stars with him. Either way, if you're with Luffy, you all fly with him, which is what each Straw Hat recruitment never fails to show. Chopper is given a hope and promise that people will love him. Robin is given a family she can finally be herself with. Frankie is given acceptance of both him and his creations with his sailing ship. Brook is given a music-loving captain who found a connection and second chance in Laboon. And Jinbei is given a man who he knows can help eventually break the prejudices and oppression of his people. But I didn't mention Usopp there, and that's because I have to add, if Luffy hates cowards, why is Usopp the exception? Simple. It's because he isn't a coward. Usopp acts cowardly, he gets scared, but he faces his fears every day. And that isn't a coward. He's a self-proclaimed coward, but Usopp will do anything he can if it means protecting the people he loves. It may be through snot and tears, but it's a determination nonetheless. And that's exactly what Luffy can see. All Usopp wants is to be a brave pirate warrior of the sea, so Luffy reached out his hand to help him make that dream come true. Without the Straw Hats, Luffy would not be Luffy. Every single one of them holds an important place in his heart, and this crew has not been put in some weird pecking order. While strength does have a factor in it at times, it doesn't matter how weak or strong any of these guys are individually, because Luffy has made sure to always make up for it. And with his will to protect, every other Straw Hat feels that same passion and need to keep everyone safe. Also, in my opinion, the strongest captain or crew is not made up of big leagues you seek out. I think strength is made from what you love when putting your heart first. The reason Luffy has the strongest crew is because he can recruit anyone, and they will be safe so long as they're under his wing, and so long as he loves them and they love him. Strength comes from the heart, not from inauthentic ties of strong people just putting up with each other. This is why it's so interesting Blackbeard seems to be purposefully recruiting strong people he doesn't seem to get along with personally, because it's a direct contrast to how Luffy lives as a pirate. Either way, part of Luffy's strength and will to conquer 100% comes from his love for his family. He has grown in power and in person thanks to them, and they have all done the same back. It's why he will fight tooth and nail to make sure they're all safe. Because the loss of any Straw Hat means the end for Luffy. It's just extremely fortunate Luffy seems to be a people person through and through, an aspect of his character that helped him gather these exceptional people, which is exactly what we'll be looking at next.
Oh man, that's the guy I was waiting for.
Why is Luffy such a people person? It's natural. He has charisma, he has charm, the riz if you will, and he has a good sense for sniffing out the true purpose of a person hidden beneath layers of bullshit. This is probably thanks to Luffy's ability to say things how they are, to see how things are, and to cut to the chase no matter what. Once again, he wears his heart on his sleeve. And it's very hard to lie to a person like that. Even Buggy and Mr. 3 found it difficult to do so. The two of them crying whenever Luffy showed them genuine smiles of appreciation will always make me laugh. Luffy is extremely good at reading people because he is an exceedingly simple person. He doesn't double think on anyone's meanings. And for master manipulators, like, say, Doflamingo, this Gumu Gumu guy is their kryptonite. Because what the hell are you gonna do against someone who works on pure instinct when you work on the insecurity and indecisiveness of others? There are no games with Luffy, just straight up vibes. Something I've learned in my constant rereadings and rewatchings of One Piece through the years is to always trust Luffy, especially when it comes to character. He was right about Robin being a nice person, he was right about Lord not betraying them, and he was right about every single selection of his own crew. It's kind of hard to go against those numbers when the bull is always in Luffy's thought in terms of relationships. But how does this help Luffy? While he can read people, is he able to use it for
They got us around.
The answer quite simply is yes, even if it comes with some struggles from time to time. The issue with Luffy is when he decides something, he decides, like I said, he may work on the instant, but this isn't an instinct of kill or this is an instinct of what he wants to do because he thinks it's the right thing to do, no matter what anyone else says, and that's where his selfishness comes into play. For example, the situation with dragons. Luffy promised Hachi he would not cause a scene, and he would not touch a celestial dragon, but Luffy couldn't stand it. In front of him, he sees his friend who has been shot, and he's being told to do nothing. This promise in itself was not for Hachi's protection, but for the protection of Luffy. Essentially, Hachi doesn't want Luffy to get hurt for him, but Luffy doesn't care. So let's look at this simply the way Luffy did. The punching of this celestial dragon, by all means, was a selfish act on Luffy's behalf, because he broke the promise made with Hachi. But once again, it's selfless selfishness. Luffy is not fighting simply to fight here. He's not breaking the promise due to any malicious thoughts. It's simply due to the fact Luffy cannot and will not put up with the restriction placed on himself and others. He will not stand for the hurt of others, especially if the person causing the pain believes to be untouchable. Luffy does not believe in titles, he does not believe in classes, and he does not believe in looking down on or looking up at anyone. Luffy is not seeing a celestial dragon as a celestial dragon. He is seeing this guy as an obnoxious asshole. So, of course, Luffy is going to punch the shit out of him. This is a solid trait Luffy holds, and it follows him all the way to Wano. An extremely similar scene in comparison to Hachi's own is when Luffy goes to punch Kaido for the first time. In the same way Hachi told Luffy not to cause a scene, Law told Luffy not to touch Kaido. But what does Luffy see? He sees Kaido going all out on a helpless village, because he believes them to have stepped out of line under his iron fist. Law's begging Luffy not to start a fight now, and by all means, Luffy does try his best to follow Law's plan. When it comes to Luffy, he does actually try to follow plans. Despite popular belief, he does listen to Law when he can. Even if he doesn't understand it, he'll follow along when need be. The thing is, a lot of the time, these plans do tend to involve a great bit of sacrifice to keep the Straw Hats and crew safe, so long as they don't get discovered. And Luffy refuses to accept meaningless sacrifice, especially when it's not chosen and when it's forced upon an individual. Just like Sabaody, Luffy's anger overwhelms him upon watching Kaido take out lives, so he ignores Law and jumps forward. Is this immaturity? Is it immature to see hundreds of people dying and deciding to try and do something about it when you can just run away? I wouldn't call that immature, especially since feeling anger in that moment is extremely warranted. Luffy greatly cares about people. His instinct is to protect. His heart tells him to do something about it, so he does. Sabaody to Wano is not an example of how Luffy hasn't matured. This is an example that Luffy has core principles and has a big heart, and that will not change. Once again, maturity does not mean you become jaded or you stop caring. There's a big difference between zero development and keeping the core of a character. Something I do want to touch on in this section is how Luffy's heart and his reading of people has evolved over time. As I explained in my VV video, Luffy is very good at understanding emotion and person. Sometimes he just doesn't know how to navigate it. VV specifically has taught him that a quick, violent solution isn't always the answer. Sometimes the best thing you can do is bow your head and show your compassion, because no one is above an apology, and no one is above bowing their head. If a princess to a possible future queen can do it, so can the future pirate king, which Luffy has embodied from her and has carried from his complication with Hancock all the way to Bonnie in Egghead. The best best way to understand his evolution of emotional intelligence is by analyzing the 2 times a member of the crew has tried to leave. Usopp in Water 7 and Sanji during Whole Cake Island. Water 7 can be a tough one to discuss, considering the way you see the situation. I think Luffy was correct in retiring the Mary for the safety of the crew and for the Mary itself, but he was totally wrong in how he handled it. It's one thing to make a decision in a tough situation, it's another thing to reveal your decision to others in such a situation, especially when the decision in question affects everyone. Luffy understood Usopp's sorrow in giving up the Mary, but he didn't understand Usopp's anger, mainly because Luffy didn't actually understand Usopp's turmoil of himself at that moment. Usopp even admits later on to Frankie that he knows the Mary cannot survive any further travels, but after losing the money needed for the ship, and after Usopp had tried to fix the Mary countless times, and the fact Usopp had a personal connection to the Mary, Luffy's delivery of such a decision came cold and hard, with no consideration for Usopp. Luffy only escalated the situation. He chose to fight Usopp, to the point Sanji had to kick Luffy into shape due to just how much damage Luffy was causing, mentally, to his own crewmate. This by all means was a total moment of immaturity on Luffy's part, and is probably why Zoro didn't even flinch when Luffy was kicked into shape. Unfortunately, the moment Luffy chose to apologize was too late, because it felt inauthentic. It was essentially a mum yelling at their kid to say sorry, honestly. Not exactly that, but you get the point. I know a question here would be, well, wasn't Usopp being immature? You could say Usopp's own outburst was immature, but we have to remember he wasn't looking for a fight. He was in a moment of total distress. Luffy is the captain, and he learnt what it means to be the captain in this moment. If Luffy hadn't escalated this situation, it's very possible a fight would not have started, and his tears at the end are caused by his own lapse of judgment and immaturity. It's why Zoro tells him to keep his head and to stand strong. This is what Luffy has chosen. This is what Luffy has caused, and he cannot waver, lest he causes the crew as a whole to waver. Once again, Luffy was right about the Mary, which Usopp also knew, but his management of it showed what a boy he was. A captain, at least a good captain, does not just navigate physical matters, but matters of the heart as well. With Usopp, Luffy understood that his simplicity of ways can be a negative, and being a captain takes more than a strong punch. So with that in mind, let's jump to Whole Cake Island. I truly believe you'd have to be crazy to say Luffy has not developed or matured as a character when Whole Cake Island is right there. The situation with Sanji was not the same, but it was similar to Usopp's. Sanji's situation was a personal matter, a pure matter of heart, and Luffy understood how to maneuver it this time. Most importantly, he understood not to escalate it. In Water 7, what Usopp needed was to be assured he is part of the crew. Usopp needed validation from Luffy that no one is replaceable on the Straw Hats, and Luffy didn't give him that. If anything, he made it worse by picking a fight. And again, who kicked him when Luffy told Usopp he can just leave? Sanji. And what is Sanji majorly struggling with in Whole Cake Island? His sense of worth, especially his sense of permanence amongst the Straw Hats. Sanji, like Usopp, starts a fight. In the exact same way as Usopp, Sanji didn't want to fight. He's made it clear for Luffy to stay away, that he's made his decision. But what does Luffy do? He stands his ground, and he looks Sanji right in the eye while doing it. It's important to note Sanji did hesitate, but Luffy's taken a fair few kicks blinks before he sees the hesitance. Luffy's not all out brawling with Sanji because he's showing Sanji with his actions that he values him enough to not further escalate the situation. Sanji can do what he wants, but Luffy will not waver.